Yeah, push it in, it was in my purse.
Oh, it is.
And it said, it yelled out in the
January
service.
12th, 2023, it's 3:30 something. 3:40-ish. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna have a presentation discussion of draft outline and framework for the comprehensive plan update. And, it'll include a review and discussion of the draft proposed guiding principles and goals. We're gonna try to get through at least all the goals today. We have another meeting in 2 weeks. We wanna make sure we at least touch on every topic. We're gonna try to stay, not completely bogged down on one topic today. If we need to, we can come back and go more in depth on those topics that we have more discussion about next week, next time. So with that being said, I know you've got the presentation there, Elena, so you want to take it.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time to make it today. So today, like Ken said, we're going to look at the draft vision statement that you guys got last time, and we're also going to go over that document that was presented to you guys that includes the different elements and the associated goals of the comprehensive plan. Again, this is just a draft, so the idea is let's take a look at it, figure out how we can make it better, figure out what's missing from it, and then on the 26th, DCJ will be here and we'll discuss it with them more in person. So we wanted to just kind of get some comments. If you don't get through everything today, don't worry, we'll finish the discussion on the 26th. But with that, first I want to take a look at the draft vision statement. So this is the proposed vision statement for the comprehensive plan. This comes from those initial exercises that you guys did with DCJ, those visioning exercises, and also from those various focus groups and surveys, and that different public feedback we received. And so it reads, as the oldest town in Texas, Nacogdoches embraces its cultural and historical roots while celebrating the diversity of its people and traditions. Preservation of our natural environment, promotion of economic vitality will serve as a backbone to a thriving Nacogdoches for generations to come. And so right now, I just thought we'd go around the room, or if anyone wants to raise their hand if they have any additional thoughts. I like to hear them. Also, we have Cory Brown in the back. She's our project assistant. She'll be making notes during the meeting, so she'll be documenting all of your comments, and we should share that with the group and then send it to the consultant as well.
Well, I hate to put a thing, but I when you say embraces, I'm not sure if I like that word, and I'll tell you why. Because there's so many different cultural events that happen in NAC, and not everybody really embraces them. That's just my point of view.
So you think there's a better one, or?
Well, I don't know about the word. I mean, I don't know what's a better word, but I mean, I want to be doing what we're saying.
What acknowledges maybe? Instead of
I think that's
embrace,
better
maybe
than embracing,
acknowledge?
because I don't think it's embraced. That's my feeling.
So would it be more so like seeks to embrace, not that we are currently doing
Right,
so?
because we're not.
That's something that we should work to do more of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes more sense.
So maybe just embrace, like change the wording of the embraces. Like take it from present tense to maybe future of what we would like to.
Yeah, we have taken, this is a vision statement, this is where we want to go. And the idea is that we're not there yet, but
Yeah.
we're just trying to outline.
Just be aspirational.
Yeah.
Anyone else? If you don't have any comments, that's fine too. Just want to give the opportunity to open the floor for anyone who wanted to ask questions or comments on it. Okay. Well, with that, we'll go on to the wheel. So this is that wheel that DCJ presented. It includes 4 kind of overarching elements, including economic vitality, environmental sustainability, community identity, and connectivity. Then under each one is an additional guiding principle. And these
I have a general question. There are some things that I thought are kind of missing that I'm not sure fit into these goals. So maybe it's a bigger question. So for example, the general question of land use, that covers housing, that covers the parks, it covers, you know, how much can we afford? You know, how much green space can a city like ours afford? Where do we want to develop? All of that, I think, because this does dictate land use. I don't know if we need a separate goal for land use, but the question about an efficient, effective, use of our land. That was one of the things I couldn't find in here. And also our relationship with SFA. That's a big kind of, I don't know if it goes under a goal, or so I'm just trying to raise the ones that those were two in particular that.
What would a land use goal look like?
Well, I don't, so here's my question. I'm hoping that because we have a consultant, who is well versed in this, maybe even identifying the usable land within the city that can be built upon, or could have parks, or could have, and what to do with land that is in the floodplain, how we look at land that is alongside the creeks. Possibly, do we want certain areas of more concentrated density, development? So it goes over several of the different goals we have, and what can we afford? For example, in parks, there's something expanding our parks. Well, how much parkland can we afford as a city? It's just and maybe we need to organize where the parks are. But basically, it comes under land use.
I think it maybe be under like the natural resources section. I read it more as like a environmentally aware area, but that could be theoretically under there too, of like more generally all of our natural resources. What do we advocate? What do we
do with our land? Or?
Kind of like best use.
So kind of like
It could be its own. It could go under. It crosses over housing. It crosses over our natural resources. It crosses over parks. It crosses over, and it's an economic question, is what it is. So I'm hoping that our consultants will give us more information about that. Drainage. We have so much. So many drainage issues. So anyway, I don't know what you want to do with it, but it was something that I saw missing. And SFA, our whole work with SFA, do we have internships? Do we have, and again, that crosses over all these other things, and especially since we're now going into a system. And that is included in land use too. So for example, do we want to tell University of Texas, wait a minute, your land isn't taxed, so we really don't want you to go acquiring more land in the city, because I don't know if we can afford it. So maybe you might want to build up instead of, our student hand. Those two were big categories, and I actually don't have an answer for you, but I wanted to raise the questions.
And those are great questions. Tori's taking note of all those, and we'll just pass those along, and we'll ask you to be prepared to answer some of those when we meet on the 26th.
When we discussed the last strategic plan, the comprehensive plan, there was a section on land use in it, and I think we said that was a good element of it. And one weakness that we noticed was it really didn't address I-69 and the concept of land usage, figuring in I-69 in it. And I think that's an important element of this too, especially with land usage. How is I-69 going to affect our land usage in the city, and what is it going to look like in the future? Are things going to gravitate out to that part of the loop? What's going to happen? And I think that's an element that's missing.
There's
this is under housing, there's nothing about protecting any of the neighborhoods that are here either.
I think that's under the,
Yes, it's
And it may be under something else.
yeah,
I see it a little bit
that's in the
under
neighborhood. part.
Preserving neighborhoods.
Like economic vitality, it talks about tourism that embraces local character, history, and natural environment as well. So it's kind of, it may not be under the,
For housing,
yeah, for housing more so, but
So we can see it when we get to that section, if
Like
it's
right here.
covered well enough.
like
I think
tourism.
as we go through it, you may see things that, you know, you didn't realize were included in a different section, and then at the end, we'll know, okay, well, I didn't see this during our review, and then we'll make sure to note that as well. But in regards to this goal, under, so it's economic vitality, and then housing, do you guys have any, issues or questions or recommended changes to this goal? They get pretty high level,
What was yours?
aspirational in nature.
I had said, if we put that meet, then we're never gonna meet them all. If we put to, and strive to meet.
Strive to meet.
Okay, maybe that would be better.
Well,
Tell her.
I don't wanna try.
so,
Here's
go
a
ahead.
comment over here too.
When I was listening to what Kathleen was saying, I was kind of struck, I thought about that as well, but I was struck by, if we say that meet, then we already fail, because we know we can't totally meet. But if we said that strive to meet, then we're working towards doing that and trying to include people. So if you put it like that, then, you know, you don't wanna look like we're failing when we really are trying.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like words like that, and again, these goals are meant to be, like, we can work towards, not necessarily reflect existing conditions, but what do we wanna try to achieve?
Yeah.
But no, I think adding, words in there that make it more clear.
Yeah.
and-
One of the things that really has disturbed me, and maybe the rest of you, we want to say NAC together, all together, and do all these things together, but so many communities feel like nobody pays attention to them. And if they can't see that we're moving toward trying to do something for all the groups, and if they see that we're trying, they'll know that we haven't forgotten about them, and they're willing to work with everybody to try to make things better in some of these areas.
That's a great comment.
so one thing missing under housing is encouraging home ownership. And I know that came out in several, places that I was part of, so I did not see it in housing, home ownership. And,
No, in that packet, you have the elements, the goals, and then recommendations, but again, we wanna focus on these kind of high-level goals first, and if we go through all those, then we'll get into the recommendations. So, Tori's back there furiously taking notes, trying to gather everyone's comments.
so I'm not sure, are we looking, can you go back up? Is the goal correct? What recommendations are missing? What recommendations, where are we now? Could you help me?
Yeah, so,
Are we just looking at the goal itself?
yes, so,
Okay,
right now, I wanna focus on the goal statement,
okay,
so we
thank
can
you.
try to get through each topic, and
Okay.
then go back, we have time to, get into the recommendations.
Thank you for
So
clarifying.
is the goal correct? Can be worded better, is there something missing from it? So, sounds like you've got a lot of feedback just on that. Anything else before we move to the next one?
I would prefer to have in the, both housing and home ownership options
Okay.
instead of just housing, because it's not just having a
That's
house,
understood, isn't it?
it's having a place of your own too.
Isn't that really a goal of upcoming, like, millennials? I mean, are they really into homeownership though?
Well, for anybody who wants it, I mean, everybody doesn't have to own a home, but
Yeah.
to have ownership.
Well, I hear you. I don't think it's forcing people to.
Yeah.
It's just giving an option, opportunity, and as well as for people who have rented all their life and they may want to, but there may need to be resources that's available to people so they can make those proper steps to becoming homeowners.
Yeah, and so I think maybe,
Well,
maybe
housing
quality
options cover
options
that.
includes both rental and homeownership. So options is pretty open.
Yeah.
So are we going to include it, or we're not going to include home?
Tori's taking all of those notes, and then we'll
Okay.
share that with the consultant, and we'll discuss it more on the 26th.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, so next one, tourism. Expand tourism that embraces
back to tourism and ask a question? They list, local character, history, and natural environment, but educational tourism, entertainment tourism are a couple of things that you might consider adding to that, which are growing and developing. And I think we're designated as a Texas Music City, is that right?
That's right.
So that would be entertainment tourism.
Anything else on the tourism element?
I agree, I think the tourism is a little too narrow. Seems to be focused on history, ecotourism.
So expand tourism is the local character, history, and natural environment. So I heard, we kind of massage it to include language about entertainment, education, you know, basically more broad.
The
kind of
arts.
goal that covers arts.
The arts.
I think the goal itself is broad, but then when it goes into recommendation, those things are maybe left out, but,
Yeah.
If we just said expand tourism, it would be more broad,
yeah,
but it goes into some specific things.
yeah, in the
like
recommendation.
character, history, and natural
Well, no,
environment.
even in the
Maybe
statement.
the local character is doing a lot of work there, but I'm not sure what that is.
They want people to come tour our characters. We got plenty of them,
If
some
you
of them in
do,
this room.
if you do expand it and it shows up on our plan, then people will see the plan and say, oh, yes, this is a place where I can get educational tourism, or this is a place where this is a music center,
Yeah.
or this is a state park. So even in the goal, expanding that a little more creatively, yeah, would, I think, be helpful and attractive.
Beginning with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, that site needs to be more reflective of all races. When you go into the center, I've had visitors that ask me, where are the black folk? Are there black folk in that establishment? I served on that board, and I don't recall at the time really pushing it really hard, but I remember having difficulty. I believe it was a black holiday, and I said, there's not a banner, there's not anything out here that represents blacks living in Nacogdoches, Texas. So if you start, I think that one of the things you can do is to start with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, where people stop and just make it more representative of all races. So people know
Yeah.
that when you say embrace the local character and the history, but if they don't see that blacks and Hispanics, et cetera, are represented, where's the historical tie?
Yeah.
And
That's
I
what
think
I
that
was
touches
trying to
back to
say.
what Ms. Marilyn mentioned,
Yeah.
is making sure that all communities feel like they're a part of Nacogdoches. So, yeah, we can say, oh, you know, you have these type of musicians, but if they don't feel like they're able to get a fair shake when they're doing a show or a performance here, then, I mean, I know musicians, but they feel like they have to leave Nacogdoches to do these type of things. And it's just one of those elements to where they, like she mentioned, making sure that they feel like they're included with Nacogdoches. And I feel like they'll be a lot more open to it. If you have tourists come in, they can say, okay, I have a choice of what type of shows I wanna go to, as opposed to, no disrespect, but a country music show at Bonita Creek, they have a variety of music or art to choose from. Because that community feels like they embrace City of Nacogdoches, in response.
And I'm on the CVB board, and I will say, you know, that's a discussion that whenever we do any publication or anything else that's taken into account. So I think the staff is really working to be aware and focused on that, but obviously not enough.
You can add inclusivity in that goal
Yeah.
somewhere. Expand tourism that embraces, inclusivity and local
most definitely.
Bashar, how about if we say, that embraces the diverse local character, history, and natural
But
environment?
we can be
That's
diverse
good.
but not inclusive.
Right.
So we can be diverse, but we still not
Right.
being inclusive of all.
Yeah.
So we wanna, I would rather inclusive rather than
Inclusive.
diverse.
So that's good.
Yeah.
I'm good with all that.
Corey, are you enough back there? Okay, good. All right, anything else on tourism in this goal? Those are all great comments, thank you.
And I just wanted to add, we have a huge Native American First Nations, and the early Spanish settlers, and, I mean, we have, and not to mention, you know, people who have come from Mexico and from all of South
Spain.
America, and
So
we
maybe
have a
we should say,
huge.
we should do both diverse and inclusion.
Okay, I like that.
Of the local characters or
Yeah.
something like that. The diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
Some use both of those to kind of feed off of each other.
But that's, never mind.
That's a good point,
Yeah.
to include all of those.
Okay, so I guess this is for downtown specifically, and again, remember there's also a separate downtown master plan, and so this is more of like kind of the high level overarching, and the downtown master plan will have a more specific set of goals, and when we get those drafts, we'll share them with you too, so you can review them as downtown can get review them as well. But this one states, we promote the downtown as a dynamic destination to experience local business, entertainment, history, and culture. What do you think?
I'm Mm-hmm. at
checked, and, 75961 is identified as a hub, historically unutilized business. There are certain, federal programs that, may impact small, and minority-owned businesses. I would love to see our plan, reflect an effort to bring those programs to our community. Now, my business is in 75961, and I'm clearly a minority business. But you don't hear anything about the funding, and all in all, that's the bottom line when it comes to creating more identification, more identifiable, places, architecture, parks, et cetera, with the funding. And so I wonder if we have made an effort to identify opportunities that might be existing for small business owners in this hub zone. And I checked on the hub map, and we are 75961 is a hub zone, but I'm not sure there's ever been a connection or an activity associated with tying some federal funding
Yeah,
to it.
okay.
Yeah, that's the reason I have
That's a
trouble
good
with that
idea.
word trying to,
Mhm.
because that leaves a way out.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, instead of putting a plan in place that is assured.
This is what we want.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
our stated
This is what
vision.
our vision, this is where we want to go.
Yeah, I see what your point. This is our vision, and we're together on that vision.
And
It may not be there yet, but it's our vision.
Well, and I think it's okay if these goals are ambitious, right? It's meant to be like,
Absolutely.
so we shouldn't try to, if they're big and bold, that's okay. But they should reflect what the community wants, public input.
My only thought about this one, it's actually included in the recommendations, but I don't feel like the goal talks about people living downtown. Like it talks about people coming and experiencing downtown, but I feel like if we want, I mean, again, it's included in the recommendations, but I feel like our goal needs to say something about the fact that if we want downtown, do we want downtown to just be something that people come and visit and go away from? Or are we wanting downtown to be something that there are people who stay
It
there?
can linger, as opposed to what this Fredonia is kind of like the only, so,
There's some houses and stuff down there now, and that's,
Partners.
yeah.
right.
It's the word destination.
Yeah,
that says that's where.
Right, it makes
we're
it seem
gonna-
like it's just a
like you
temporary,
come, you visit it, and you leave.
you
That's-
experience it. To me, it feels, we're kind of missing something about it, implying that there are people who are there and staying there. And there's things that are allowing them to stay in that area.
And I have a question about D5, which is not the goal, but one of the recommendations. So if we're gonna put housing in that, then that would be relevant to what I have to ask.
So adding like housing into the actual
If you
goal.
add housing into the goal, then that would tie to this, but if you add housing there, then you should have a goal for
There, we do, well, we have
a
recommendations.
recommendation. for
There
that.
are, there's recommendations in.
I know, and I have a question about that
Right.
recommendation.
That's a recommendation. My point is just that if we're gonna have recommendations about housing, we should probably make the goal.
And,
say
and-
that.
and I'm saying that I have questions about that recommendation, which, if that recommendation is not accepted, it shouldn't be in the goal. When the goal is gonna affect the recommendations gonna affect the goal.
Well, I mean, just as a logical way to look at it, you have more people downtown, you're gonna have theoretically more business and entertainment options because there's more people there.
Right.
Restaurant options, but, so I mean, I see how they're related, but I wonder if this should say, instead of it as a dynamic destination, if we're underselling it, is it the main thing that we want? Because we have a whole downtown master plan. Shouldn't it be the premier destination in town, like the focus, like, get everybody to go downtown first and then
Trickle out to the
go
rest of the
somewhere
city.
else from there? Or, that was my thought, is maybe we're underselling it or maybe we're not prioritizing it correctly.
So I have a large question about that. I mean, our downtown is a small area, and and this is again land use and planning, and, I mean, do we want people to go to downtown for this, or, you know, or maybe we want like three kinds of hubs. I can't see everything happening downtown. Like, you know, maybe, you know, college students might really want to go to this particular hub of, you know, of businesses and entertainment, and other people might want, it's too small to be all things to all people, I think.
Well, I mean, I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't say it, but it was a question that I wondered as I read this. I think you raised the same question I'm raising, is really what I'm saying. I don't know this, but I would love it from the consultants. I would love to hear, I mean, do they always try and have one central hub, or are there two or three hubs? Yeah, this is just something I don't know, and I don't know how you would deal with it.
One
Isn't
of
it-
the issues on downtown that came up, I know in some of the things that I participated in, is parking.
Yes.
And parking is always an issue when there's an event downtown. So we add the more and more layers of things that are added on downtown, the infrastructure of downtown can't necessarily support all that. There's also a tremendous lack of shade from the sun downtown, or spots for people to cool off, and that came up in any of those sessions. So, maybe asking downtown to do too much for the infrastructure that we have in place.
And then there's the question of where does downtown end? I'm sure y'all have taken that up, but you
Well,
go
downtown
over
is.
at University, you go over one block and you got Shawnee, which used to be a thriving
That's right.
black business community, and there's still a few businesses on that street. But has that determination been decided where downtown ends?
Sorry. I know that they have included that in the work that they're gonna try to do. They've added that you don't have to just be straight in the downtown to be connected to that downtown historical park, and they put that, they're working on that.
Do you know?
Gary's
That's
help.
significant for funding purposes.
Yeah.
You know, because if
I think they've already accepted that to go into that.
The downtown committee, one of the things that they've been looking at is like the core downtown, and then like the periphery.
And that's been
and,
added, yeah.
Transition zones, and should it be expanded, should you have like sub areas of downtown? They have been working on that and discussing it and.
They have decided to add it. And I know Gary is working very closely with them, Gary Roberts, on developing things, and they've decided how far, you know, and I think we're trying to expand that.
So-
Not that I'm on that, but
So
I've been working on it.
That is a big part of the discussion that they've been
Yeah.
having, with the downtown committee and the property owners and business owners down there. So it's definitely a topic.
So,
Well, I wonder if any of those, talking about exclusivity, if any of those small businesses like Sadler and several others along that corridor are included in the, downtown, what do they call the monthly meetings or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the downtown merchants have a monthly meeting, like before downtown, and it's kind of informal. They used to have like a HOA or POA, but now they just meet monthly to talk about different things they're dealing with, events. I'm not sure all the groups that are involved in that. I know Jessica Sal, project manager of the downtown plan, she's been, the one kind of facilitating those meetings. I can ask her. If you like.
so I'd like to, I think that's really helpful, and it's helpful to me in envisioning what we want, whether we want a central or we want several spots. I'm thinking that, I can see a city, an urban, place wanting to bring people back to downtown, and that's a big effort. And not, I mean, I love our downtown and we need to have people downtown, but I would like that definitely addressed as part of land use. Is it only the downtown that we want to have a center, or could we have different centers of different kinds of things? Like, for example, I've always thought a children's museum with all of our different histories and everything would be great, and have a children's, I don't know the answer to that, but I would like our consultants to address that. Because this is part of being rural as opposed to being a big urban, and I don't mean urban is a bad word. I'm just saying we have a different configuration of our city. So anyway, I had something.
Did you want to talk about, you had a question about the housing recommendation? Did you want to mention that while we're on that topic?
Yes.
Downtown?
Let's see, where is it? It's,
D5.
facilitate the addition of housing stock into the downtown core. It's right there. My question was, where did that come from? And, I mean, is that based on, solid evidence and data? I'm not quite sure, again, where that's coming from. If it's coming from some of the focus groups, I would like to know where. I'd like to know some of the whys on that too. For example, if we increase the housing in the downtown heart of downtown, that causes problems again with parking. Because people that live there, and I know people that live downtown, they have parking problems already. Especially when it comes to festivals and things, some of them can't even park close to their place that they live. So there's implications for those sort of things that I don't know if they've been thought out. If they're recommending something for the downtown plan that would deal with that, then that's wonderful. But
I used to live downtown, and I think there were about 40 people who lived down there. And you're right, when you had an event, you didn't have the parking spot that was really close to where you lived, but there were parking spots where you could find and walk, with a reasonable distance.
But SFA students want to park right next to the building that they're in.
I understand, but you're just kind of, you treat it as your neighborhood, and if you can't always park in front of your spot, you're still gonna see those
it's just got something you know you're signing up for if you're moving downtown. That there's a possibility of something going on downtown and you're not really being able to park where you accustomed to parking every single time, so. Maybe that's something that they do include in the downtown master plan, but,
I think it's definitely something we should bring up on the 26th and kind of pose that question to the consultant, get their feedback on that too.
yeah.
And maybe it might help us if we start thinking, if this is what we're trying to promote, if we don't think about what we have now, but if we double everything. So if instead of 40, you had 80 people, what would we have to do to have 80 people there and this and that and that and this and what?
Well, again, I'm assuming they looked at the events that we have downtown, you know, like Blueberry Festival, all the other things that we have downtown, and what draws the most crowd. I don't know, I mean, sometimes there's big crowds, sometimes there's not real big crowds, but to me, it seems like the Blueberry Festival is the one that draws a big crowd. And if it's only a one event thing that creates that issue, then I mean, we can't go out and make parking lots, and we can't go, you know what I mean? It's,
I think it's pretty much any event we have downtown, there's parking issues.
yeah, anywhere I mean, unless
It's
you.
not just Blueberry Festival, it's just, if there's a concert down in the park, there are, it gets congested and hard to find places to park.
It also may just be about experience, like having lived in downtown Austin and in Georgetown, we have substantial parking here. Like our parking seems amazing. So it's always weird to me when I hear people talk about parking here, because I'm like, we don't have a parking problem.
Well, even if you have to park
I mean, I know
down.
that people who have not experienced that, if they have to walk more than 20 feet, suddenly it feels like it's a parking issue. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that, like you say, people who live downtown, they know what they're kind of getting into. And in Georgetown, whenever they would have a big event downtown, there is no parking in downtown Georgetown. So we would just park somewhere else and get bussed in like they do for Blueberry Festival, and everybody kind of knows that's the deal. And we would rather have it that way than have a big ugly parking lot that's empty all day. I mean, so.
So maybe that should be something that's addressed more so than the housing, is making sure the parking is able to withstand the expansion of housing.
Good point.
I know that's a big topic that they're talking about too.
Yeah, we'll create this exciting downtown area, people are gonna wanna be close to it, and in the cities like Austin, like parking there, sometimes people take advantage of it to rent out their space in their yard or stuff for parking.
That's how I plan on covering my retirement.
We're so fortunate to have the downtown that we have.
Yeah.
It's very charming, there's so much versatility.
Yeah, right.
Are you guys ready to talk about the next one under economic vitality? This is the last goal under economic vitality, business attraction and retention. And the stated goal is to attract resources of talent, innovation, and industry while retaining existing sources that support the local economy. Any thoughts? Suggestions?
I mean, when it says new sources of talent, was there specific things they were looking for? Was there specific things that they were addressing? I mean, to me, sources of talent could be a lot of things. It could be musicians playing on the street. It could be art, people on the street selling art. I mean, there's a lot of different talents, so I'm not sure what talent we're talking about. It's not clear.
It's not more, it needs to be less vague, more clarification on that.
Well, yeah, just, I mean, what do they mean by talent?
I think
mean
even
a lot of
like
different things.
internet,
A lot of different things.
And if you look at that first recommendation, it talks about continually strive to attract new industry, commerce, and employment opportunities, which kind of expands upon that a little bit. And so the goal is kind of vague.
Yeah.
And then, like an example of one of the recommendations, and does a deeper dive into that a little bit. That doesn't mean, can't ask for clarification on the goal.
Okay.
Would make more sense.
I assume it's talking about finding employees that fit businesses you're trying to attract to town.
So I
I've
think.
heard that's an issue with some employers not finding the type of
Question. Am I the only one that doesn't know what a tax increment reinvestment zone
I'm
is?
glad you mentioned that, because we talked about it yesterday. So, tax increment reinvestment zone is essentially where you can, cities can take a designated area that they want to target for improvements in infrastructure or landscaping or, what have you. And what they do is they assess the, property value in a given point of time. So like, if we were saying we want to do a terrace in downtown, we would look at, okay, what's the 2023 valuation of these properties? And then moving forward, if you were to adopt it, you could actually take excess revenue above that and then invest it back into that area. So, it doesn't raise the actual tax rate. It just allows the city to use those revenue funds and target them improvements in that area. So for new sidewalks or landscaping or updates to your utilities. And so basically it's just a tool to, reinvest for the taxes that are collected for an area to get put back directly into that area.
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, but I think we need, I mean, you're exactly right, and it's very, very complicated, and there are pros and cons, and I think before we actually have it as a very, I would have brought this up when we got to the specifics here. But we need a, right, we need a full discussion, and we need some of, you bankers and you know, to sit down and decide, do we want, to have,
Would it make sense?
TERSs?
Yeah,
Or,
and
or do we not, and that's all,
And
that's
we're
all.
absolutely gonna get into those, discussions. This is a common tool that cities will use when they're trying to, incentivize or promote or make a concerted effort to reinvest in a specific area, like a district or a business district, it could be an arts district, it could be,
But we wouldn't really know what it is and choose it before we have it before we adopt it as a recommendation, I think.
Especially
I thought it'd be a good
when it's
idea for me to understand it before I endorsed it as a part of a plan that I'm gonna sign off on.
Well, aren't we just now talking about the goals?
yes.
Yeah.
So we're definitely gonna get into the recommendations, but that's still a good question, for sure.
Great.
For other people here who were like, what's a TERS?
Especially when it's a recommendation to establish, it's not
Right.
investigate or anything else, it just says establish.
Well, maybe that's what if you can put that to investigate or to explore.
So there are no new taxes on those businesses?
Yeah, I'm not the expert on that. Larissa would be able to give you more detailed information, but based on cities that I've worked in, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that basically it doesn't increase the tax rate, so the property owner doesn't pay more taxes. It just allows the city to target those revenues specific to that area instead of them going to the general fund.
Right,
And,
but then that reduces money available for other things.
That means taxes go up for everybody else, I think.
Maybe, it just has to be explored.
It
Yeah.
could.
yeah, we'll definitely bring that up and have them explain that, when we meet with them. And I can ask, actually, I think what I'll do is I'll talk to Larissa after, share some information, and we'll share it with the group. So I'm sure she's got lots of resources at her disposal. She can probably give me a really quick fact sheet that explains it in much clearer detail, and we'll share that with everyone. Anything else on this one? All right, let's go to the next one. So this section is environment and sustainability, and this goal is related to parks and recreation. And remember, we have a parks and recreation master plan, and several of these goals are actually, from that scope, but doesn't mean they can be tweaked a little bit, because these are given at a high level. So, enhance and expand parks, recreational programs, and facilities to ensure they continue serving as vital community assets.
Okay, so this gets back to my land use question. I would like them to say how much park space, how much non-taxed land can a city of our size and our, our economic, our income, how much can we have before we bankrupt ourselves? And, so, and, cause we may need to, revise where our parks are, but not necessarily expand them. Every time we have more park space and more, that's less taxable land.
Well, I'm not reading that as expand parks, I'm reading it as expand park programs, because you have expand parks programs and recreational programs.
Well, it says expand parks.
If you continue on, expand parks and recreational programs.
I think what you're saying, yeah,
Is it parks and or
Cause
parks?
Parks and
Yeah.
Rec.
And.
that's interesting. I didn't read it like that, that's interesting. And
think
also,
you're
I don't
right.
know that, I think, I mean, we want to have sufficient parks and recreational programs. I don't know how much we can afford when we're looking at like infrastructure too. So when we had the parks, the master plan, that was to expand, and we did. And
Well, we still have tons of, like, there's not a lot of ADA compliant playgrounds.
Right,
So any
right.
places for people who need that kind of equipment, we don't have that. We have one park now
Right,
and
right,
a swing in Pecan.
right. So maybe have, instead of expanding, maybe have parks and recreational programs that serve as, that meet the needs of all the people or something. Anyway, I'm worried, the land usage, what we have, I don't wanna, and maybe we need different programs too.
When
as
when you're talking
opposed
about
to
land
more.
use, are you talking about public land use? Are you talking
Yeah.
about state land use? Or are you talking about city land that city owns? Or what are you talking
Yeah,
about?
I'm talking about, we have one city, they're within, the bounds, and all of that is land. And so what is it overall that we need to have for public use for parks? What is it that we need to have for, keeping our creeks, what's the word for it, help me, you know what I mean, watershed and all that. What is it that we need to have there? And how much is this, and therefore, how much do we need to set aside? How much can we afford? How much can we afford for SFA? How much untaxed land, and where should it be? That's my bigger question.
Yeah, I just don't
And-
think they're trying to usurp land around Nacogdoches for parks. They're just trying to expand the programs.
But
Yeah, I
P3
see what you're
also
saying,
says-
In this
expanding
particular goal.
the variety of programs at each park, because the way it seems now, these different parks cater to different, age groups. So like the one up near SFA, I noticed there's a lot of swings and everything, it kind of caters to kids, and, maybe there needs to be more different activities that cater to all age groups.
You know, like a
That would be way
skate
of-
park somewhere
Yeah.
or disc golf. More disc-
P3 does address size.
Yeah.
Scale.
So that would be the land that's taken up by.
As a suggestion for this as a goal, as printed, would it be possible that the words enhance and expand could be replaced with the single word promote? So the goal would be rewritten, promote parks and recreational programs and facilities to ensure they continue serving as vital community assets.
Or,
That-
enhance and diversify,
Or even add like what you're saying, like
Right.
that, but then adding while also considering the overall land
Right.
use needs of the community.
Right.
Or,
Right.
something that at least puts a caveat that's like, we're
Yeah.
not just gonna keep expanding.
Right.
Let's expand
Right.
while we're also considering all of our general needs.
And it could be even possible, like shrinking. Maybe they take land from Pecan, but make a pocket park in a neighborhood that
And-
needs one.
Right, that's exactly what I'm saying, and maybe we have too much of something
yeah.
for, for just this one small group and nothing for this other group. I mean, we need to think through all that instead of getting more.
I think what
so-
Kathleen's saying, or trying to say is that every time you set aside land for parks or some other non-taxable, component, that's just more that's designated that has to be maintained and less productive, less revenue producing
Right.
property.
I
And
disagree.
so there is a balance that has to be, well,
Well, I mean, people are gonna come to those parks, and I know when I was at home, like, I would drive to Lufkin to go to their splash pad, and so I would end up spending money in Lufkin for lunch
Right.
and groceries because I was already there, whereas if there was a splash pad, which there is now here, I didn't have to leave Nacogdoches. So
Nicole,
you're
I'm
bringing
totally
in-
with you, don't get me wrong, I am totally with you, I just want our consultants to, I mean, they know how much a city can bear in this kind of thing, and maybe we might need to rethink, or maybe, you're right, maybe we need to take something from here and put it over here. So I would want, this is a serious question I have for our consultants, and that's what I'm saying, land use is a huge deal,
I
to,
assume that part of this, I assume they chose the word expand because they think there's not enough current capacity, or that in the future they expect there not to be enough in the state where we are. So they must have done some, there's gotta be some data behind that.
And so.
then we need that data.
We don't know that.
We need the
I know,
data.
because they're not here right now, but they will be.
Okay, if they can bring the data, that
So
would.
is the land, so Kathleen, are you saying that the land usage needs to be in the goal or a
I'm saying until I know, I'm saying, number one, I need this data, because in October, I will get a budget from the city, well, if I'm reelected, maybe I won't, but anyway, the city, the city council will get a budget. And if we're saying this is our goal, and so we're now having to acquire this much more, and I'm sitting there saying, well, then we're gonna have to take it out of Elena Helton's salary. I mean, we're one city.
Thanks.
Sorry, just kidding. But you know what, but, yeah, right, but you know what I mean, we have to think about this, and to just, and maybe even take a look at reallocating, or, whatever, but.
But this is not a budgetary function, this is just setting a goal, and it's gonna have to compete against other needs, right? So, to determine the budget, and
It sounds to me like that goes back on the city council for you guys to have to decide that.
Well, the goals,
Right.
What,
But
I mean,
if this goal is
theoretically,
to.
the goals should drive the budget.
I think I can
Unfortunately, they very
clarify.
often don't.
well, I mean, if you do that, though, you're gonna have basically every goal system be an Excel spreadsheet.
So back this, I want data I really want data from them. I want to know, I think your point is a really good point. Did they determine that we don't have enough? If they did, what did they determine in fact? Are we saying we don't have enough? Are we saying it's in the wrong places? Are we saying we don't have enough programs? Are we saying, how do we compare with other people? And before we actually place that as an aspiration for our.
So,
And those is-
again, this comes from the Parks
Sorry.
and Recreation Master Plan, and in that plan, it talks about service areas.
Yeah.
And it has service areas all throughout the city based on population. Essentially, what it says is, as the city grows, you should have so much parkland per people. And so in order to serve future portions of the community, as we grow, you should expand your park services. And so I think that's all, that could be, that's what that's reflecting, is as the city grows and we get more people moving to certain areas, we should add more parks in that area to serve, that community. And so that could be what that's stemming from.
Well,
Does
and
it
then we
also
need the data
include-
from that too.
So that
Have we
came out of
grown
Parks
and do
and
we
Rec
have?
plan,
Does
not
that
their
also,
research.
include in the plan where they wanted to add more baseball and softball fields to bring in the tournament
Yeah.
crews? Is that maybe?
Yeah.
So,
But I'm with
they
you, 'cause
want more land?
I mean,
I'm sure, Kathleen, that there's like when I was doing skate park research, there is an actual formula for this is how you figure out how large of a skate park you need based on the population in your town. So
Right.
there's gotta be some formula
Right.
out there in the world.
and
General
we've hired
parks.
them,
Right, for sure, so
That's
that
what
makes
I-
sense that they
yeah.
would bring us that.
We don't
Right.
I'd be curious to know how much, from a percentage point of view, it's, or city limits compared to park land.
oh, yeah, exactly.
And, I believe that those numbers are actually in the Parks Master Plan too.
And how it compares to other cities is really what we're talking about, yeah. Or even per capita park space, or even, any of those things would be, we need more data, is basically.
Alright, so next one is, in regards to open space trails. And so the stated goal is protect, improve, and create environmentally sensitive open space and trail networks that are accessible to all members of the community. You guys have any thoughts on this one?
I guess we kind of have to say the same thing if we're going to talk about parks and how much money and how much land we can set aside. We're going to have to put it to this as well.
Most of the trails are unusable land or floodplains, but, undevelopable land, so. But I know if you're gonna extend, you have to acquire, you have to purchase somebody's property at some point, so.
And a lot of trails are located in easements along property, so it's not actually public land. It's in an easement on private property. It gives the city permission to go in and maintain it and take care of it. So some of them are public parks and some of them are actually, public access easements on private property. It's a combination. But that's a good point.
So there's a way to do it without spending money, but it takes longer.
And the Parks Master Plan has like a master trails plan that shows what's there today and then plans for future connections and, so this is kind of in line with that as well. Well, all right, you guys wanna, have any comments on this? Ready to move to the next one? All right. Natural resources. So this one states, manage environmentally sensitive lands, wildlife habitats, and resources to guarantee long-term sustainable conservation and preservation for future generations. And, I know that we've had a lot of discussions about this, especially some of our focus groups, and so, any comments or questions or recommendations on this one?
Who manages this?
Who manages what?
All this environmentally sensitive lands and wildlife habitats? Who manages it?
Some of them are on private property, some of them are publicly owned, it's a combination. There's lots of private property that, you'll have floodplain and creeks running along it, so it's a combination.
But I mean, would there be a board or something, or would the mayor manage it? Is it, who manages it?
Are you asking for?
Is it the state? I'm curious, I don't know.
You're asking about what?
It's just the word
instrumentality?
manage, who does that?
By what
PA
instrumentality?
doesn't,
Does the-
Environmental Protection Agency does.
Yeah, that's under the planning department of the city. They'll have to
So
manage
that goes
the
under
whole.
planning?
So, I think there's different tools in the toolbox to help, facilitate that. You can help manage, wildlife areas through your development code. You can help manage it through public programs. There's like public-private partnerships. There's actually have a lot of representation here of, state and local agencies who work in Texas Parks and Wildlife and, Texas A&M AgriLife who work on studies and stream restorations for those projects. So there's a lot of different tools that you can use to help facilitate management of those kind of resources. I don't know.
Yeah,
To answer your question,
Who do they report to? That's what you want.
doesn't like the Angelina and Neches River Authority do a lot of work too?
Oh, so we can,
And that Lanado Creek, something, somebody that's some kind of committee that.
So you really
works-
want to know about the coordination
yeah, I
and
think it
who's
was
over
Texas
that?
A&M, AgriLife Extension, worked in conjunction with Texas Parks and Wildlife to do that study on the Lano Creek watershed.
Yeah,
And they had some public meetings in the last few months to get
yeah.
feedback on that. We actually invited them to our environmental focus group. They weren't able to attend, but we have their contact information. They've been included on, in other surveys about that. And I think House Brian Bray was here because he's really got a lot of contacts with those local agencies. But they haven't been involved in these conversations.
So since all these different groups, like the wildlife parks and all of that, who within the city, I think it's what he's trying to ask, who within the city kind of coordinates and who are they, to see that people are doing those things? When they do their studies, who do they come back and give the information to? And is there somebody in the city that they report to, like, here's my study and what should I do with it, that kind of stuff? That's what you're asking, isn't it?
Steve, do you have any feedback on that? Can you answer that?
And I couldn't hear the studies for what?
Will you?
For any of
Well,
this.
question. So the question was in regards to managing environmentally sensitive lands. What kind of entities are involved in that process?
Sure.
And who do they report to?
So realize by government code, the city is only authorized to control certain things. So some of your environmental things that you see are controlled by the state, and some are controlled by the feds, and some are controlled by the feds and then segregated to the state. So we don't actually have, for example, wetlands and things are not controlled by the city, they're controlled by the state of Texas and federal rules. So while we can have preservation guidelines and things that we promote and do, we're not the enforcers. So understand there's a dividing line. So people that might do wetlands determinations or studies or threatened and endangered species, which we do on every floodplain development permit that's issued, those aren't things that really we oversee. They're things that we may have copies of. So a lot of that oversight is not within the city's, legally within the city's purview to control, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, for the city to know what they're supposed to be happening, how do they get that information? Is it given to them and they go over it with them, or?
So,
If it's like the federal government, I've done a lot of work with the federal government, I know that's, nobody sees anything, you know? But, each group is doing what they need to do, but then somebody within the city, I'm not saying that they're over them,
right,
but so that they're aware of what ought to be done and not done in our town.
Many times not. So let's just take a scenario and see if this fits what you're saying. So a development comes into town, their lender may have a process where they have to do phase 1, phase 2 environmental studies, they may have to do a wetland survey, they may have to do threatened and endangered species to meet their, honestly, to meet a lender's requirement most of the time, or a grant, if they're a grantee, to get a grant dollars. Those studies are shared with us sometimes, but not necessarily by mandate. So we may or may not know that there is some practice that they're supposed to fulfill in order to meet a state requirement, because I may not know that there's a waters of the U.S. capable tributary on their property. So it's a matter of, honestly, it's voluntary, and we don't always have that. Sometimes we do.
So if they wanted to do a park in an area that we don't have one, like in some of our, like in the 21-7 area, then that when they're making up their plans, then they must take it to the whatever group is over that, and then they say, okay, you can do that, but this doesn't fall in the guidelines. Does it work like that?
So a park, which are specifically covered under a different set of regulations, and I'm not expert on that, but parks can be created and then, if you will, gifted to a city. We've had at least a dozen since I've been at the city, opportunities for people to say, we want to give you a park, and we didn't take necessarily all of them, but they could be crafted. How we use that park then may still be controlled by federal and or state guidelines. So we may or may not be able to develop it in a certain way. We may have to maintain habitat there, but we're following the same rules that a private developer does. You know?
That's what I'm asking.
Right, yeah. And so we follow the same rules. So realize our guidelines are pretty narrow. It doesn't mean we promote or accept, or if we know about violations, we don't report it because we do. But we may not always know that, if that makes sense.
So if I can rephrase this.
Sure.
So the goal, the environment and sustainability, the goal is to manage environmentally sensitive lands, wildlife habitats, you can read that. And then underneath it, it's preserve and protect natural watersheds, creeks and floodplains. And I think there are two questions that arise is, how are we doing that and how can we do that? And then the second question is, if we're going to adopt that as a goal, who in the city will oversee that we're meeting this goal?
Well,
And I assume it's you, Steve, so.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I wonder if that's where the recommendation to create a conservation board, the number 6 recommendation?
think that's-
I wonder if that's why they're recommending that to
So,
have.
and that's like an advisory board or
Maybe.
a board with authority? So this is part of what I'm saying, it's not just about this little thing,
That's
the big question is land
That's
use.
what I was
And
trying to say.
what do we
That's always
protect,
I
how
picked it
much
up.
does it cost, who's responsible? I mean, it's a big,
Well,
And
any
the
word
answer is
in
no
like
one.
manage,
Right.
the specific, is different than another word we need to use.
That's
So
it.
we may
No
not
one.
honestly be able to manage. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So I think we need to rethink some of the word.
in my question, most of the things they have in here are aspirational, enhance, improve, create. But when you turn it to a more concrete kind of word like manage, I want to know who's doing it.
right.
And then it turns out it's a board. Who's on the board?
Yeah, and what
I mean,
authority do
it's
they have?
kind of a rabbit hole that you go down.
Well, I mean, we're more of a promoted support
Maybe we need to change that word then.
And so instead of manage, promote, and support.
I made that up.
Plan.
We'll just put, see Steve part.
Yeah, see Steve.
Thank you. Now it's time for me to leave. Any other questions? I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone.
So I have a, I'm sorry, go ahead with yours and I'll ask mine.
I wanted to know what the definition of pocket park is.
So a pocket park is, kind of like it sounds, it's small. A pocket park could be located in downtown, or a pocket park could be located in the middle of a neighborhood. It's just a smaller, more compact park.
Okay, so the little park, that little temple park, that's over on the east side, that is
That could be a pocket park.
not a very good, I mean,
Usually it's just for whoever's right in that area. It's not one that would draw somebody from the other side of town, but like the
Like-
people in that neighborhood could easily go to it, but it's not big enough for a pull from other sides of town.
Like some of the apartment complexes have them.
the statistical support. There are 30-some areas that are deficient in the availability and accessibility of parks, like on the east side. I mean,
That's
It's almost non-existent.
Right.
So who's pushing the buttons? Who's making those determinations and decisions about that land use? And is it only driven by tax dollars? Because we know there's a lot of rental properties over there, and you may not have the tax base to build these parks. So who picks that up? Who governs the development of parks and areas that are historically underrepresented?
So we do have a Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and I think we've expanded that group that basically Brian Ray reports to, and they help steer, make decisions about new parks, improvements in existing parks. So there's a city board that actually directs staff in that process. To answer your question.
But should that be a part of our planning? Is that a part of the underlying framework for the development of parks in the city?
Yeah, I'm gonna share you guys a link with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, because it goes into a lot of the things you guys are asking about. And I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with that piece of it, but I think it's a good read. It'll answer a lot of your questions, because it talks about diversity of parks, different parks serve different functions. There's different designs based on the people in that population, and so I think that could help maybe answer some of the questions. So I'll be sure to share that with you, with the whole group.
So while we have Steve standing there, I just wanted to, I'm wondering if we need some goal. We definitely need more data. We've been talking about land use, and maybe a whole goal about, efficient and effective land use that considers all of our, that considers all of our needs, and maybe reviewing our land use. Maybe something like that, but that also is something that is sustainable, economically sustainable for the city. Because, anyway, we've already covered that, but you may have some thoughts about, having one goal that really collects all this data about land use, about watersheds, about what can you do in a watershed, what can't you do in a watershed. I mean, it's great to want everything, but what can we afford, and have a full analysis. Do you have thoughts about that? I wanted, because you have.
Back out to the land use kind of macro. So it's not unusual in cities with land use to identify challenged areas, floodplain areas, environmentally difficult areas as a different kind of zoning, and we don't actually do that here.
It would be helpful maybe for us to.
I agree, because it's hard to craft how you want to treat and use and or limit those areas, and that's a different discussion from today, but you can't do it until you've identified them. So one of the things Elaine and I talked about, and Kurt, you and I talked about it, is let's at least identify them, and then we can have specifically address those separate from properties that are just beautiful green fields that may be suitable for other kinds of density and development. So I would love to see this group push forward with keeping those as an item that we can talk about separately, if that makes sense.
Okay, so maybe we can talk separately about land use.
And I'm not saying we don't use them or don't touch them, I'm saying we talk about how to manage.
Right.
And you guys are gonna see specific recommendations, proposed policies that work to implement these things through various forms with various tools. And so we're gonna see that and discuss it. I think what I don't wanna get too off track, but what I wanna focus on is this something we wanna work towards? Is this something that's a value, is one of our values? Is this something that we wanna encourage and maybe change some of our development policies in order to, achieve that?
I was gonna propose the question, kind of a rhetorical question, so where are the non-environmentally sensitive lands within the city limits? What are those? Are those designated? And if we can't designate them, then basically this goal basically means the city limits, everywhere. So,
And there's more than flood and wetlands, facultative wetland areas which are identifiable. If you think about it, we have cultural resource areas here that also have preservations right down Mount Street. That's what we're talking about. So,
right.
yeah. So, Kurt, I think all those, I think we probably have a lot of that quantified one way or the other. But I think that we could bundle those together and have, if you will, the land use mapping reflect that. So then ultimately ordinances and policies or practices, and quite honestly budgets sometimes, are crafted around how we use those properties.
May need some better definition here before we move forward.
Well, but both somebody data.
Right, data. And data on exactly what Mabel was talking about. I mean, do we have more of this in these areas and not enough in these areas? And if we can only afford so much space, then we need to cut out some of them over here and get some over there.
Sometimes more is not better.
Right.
According to Google, environmentally sensitive areas are those areas with especially fragile biophysical characteristics.
Okay, so where are those that don't meet that definition? Where's the boundary for that in academic?
So that all of it is.
Especially sensitive, fragile.
But you see what I'm saying? That's vague and ambiguous.
But I don't know that everything is especially fragile.
It's broader.
There you go.
Kurt, you're right. It's broader than you think. For example, when you do highways, we look at not just these wetland type areas, but open pastures, grasslands. There's all kinds of other plant areas and plant things that are considered. And their value is considered. So where is that? Well, if you start encompassing all those, you're right. It's big footprints of things.
So we had an area with the Texas horned toad here. We might want to make sure that we protect that.
So
Which
when do you
I know
think?
where one used to be. I don't know anymore.
So when do you think we could have this data available in this view? Because this is one of the best things this group could do, is to look at the land use in this city and to ask more questions or to.
So engineering answer, Kathy, but maybe the fact is that some of it has not been quantified.
No.
So this could propose to move forward and identify and quantify. Doesn't mean you don't create specialized land use categories to put it in later. But I think some of it hasn't been necessary to identify. Certainly had all been concatenated into one big study to give you that data. So I think some of the data, your floodplain data is there. I can export it tomorrow. Right. But part of this, we have topography challenges. We have waters of the U.S. that have been identified on a spot-by-spot basis. I understand there's a definition published, but we haven't gone and colored everything in. So yeah, I think there's a study that has to come out of this kind of recommendation that we don't necessarily have for you to finish by May.
Okay, and there may be other things that are not, I mean, I know you're putting your engineering and looking at the Waters of America stuff in there, but I'm even thinking of a little broader out, even what Juan was talking about, how much, of public land do we have, and how does that compare to other cities, and how is that sustainable for a tax base, and hopefully our consultants will bring that, and they should have that in. So
And
hopefully
that is
they
definitely
will.
gonna be something that we're gonna discuss. Part of this process is an updated future land use plan that, better reflects the values and goals and current trends, and you guys are gonna give feedback on that. And so whenever we're looking at these goals, we can either tweak this goal to make it, make more sense, or this
actually have another meeting.
Yeah, sure. We're definitely gonna finish the discussion. I just wanna leave a little bit of time at the end, so we can talk about the upcoming meetings and, make sure you guys have time to ask any additional questions.
Yeah. Can we make, can we make a first meeting at the end of the week?
We were also looking at, or if you guys wanna maybe send us some written comments separately, and we can do it that way. If you guys wanna make sure that we get that, we can create a Google form or a Word doc, basically has everything with a space for you to add your comments, and we can gather it that way as well. If we don't run, run in, have much time to do it today, or you guys just want to give us our written feedback. What do you think? We're losing people.
Written feedback with no discussion?
Well, we're gonna discuss all of this again. I just wanted to offer, if people who wanted to submit written comments to, we're then, willing to take that. I just know that if I'm on, I'll be cognizant of everyone's time, and, I don't wanna go over unless, the group wants to.
So I know we're going over this on the next meeting, what about the meeting after that?
So let's talk about upcoming meetings. So, on 26th, we're gonna have a meeting at 3:30, in person with DTJ. The day before, they're gonna have a workshop with, city council and planning and zoning commission at 5:30, the council chambers. And then we have a meeting on February 9th. We have another one on March 16th, and remember that's a special time due to the spring break, and then April 12th. That doesn't mean we can't have more meetings in between that, these are just kind of our regular standing meetings. But, now that we're really kind of getting into the weeds and we're starting to do work, we can add more meetings, if you like. So it's up to you guys. So something we can discuss, DTJ as well, because they can be at all our meetings, but they don't have to be.
Well, I wanted to just ask a question, please. When we had the last meeting and the new leader went over all these things, one of the things he said that I think hit a lot of us was that you do understand that you're not making all these decisions, that when this goes to them, that means that you totally support everything that's gonna be presented to the city. So you almost have to meet again before the 26th to discuss some of those other things if we wanna say, okay, I agree with all the goals, or you can't wait till the meeting with when they're here. So what are you gonna do?
Are you suggesting another meeting on the 19th, maybe? If we're gonna do it?
We'll do it on the
Another
19th,
meeting in between?
the thing.
What do you guys think about it? I'm okay with having a meeting next week, but I'm gonna ask the group what they think, because I know people have jobs, schedules, kids, and so, yeah, if you guys wanna meet again on the 19th, that's totally fine with me. We can, make sure that we have a room available.
I won't be available, I've got a school board.
We can't afford all these meetings.
Yeah, and I know some of you are on other committees and you're meeting too, and so really it's up to the group.
I don't know, why don't we have a vote of this? It would be worthwhile to have another meeting prior to the 26th. Yeah. We want to get it halfway through though, so.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we've really, gotten into the weeds on some of the implementation stuff and some of the strategies and recommendations. I think that this is one of those things where the draft goals really are kind of the big picture stuff, and then, those feed to the recommendations. So, if we do meet again, I'd like to make sure that we focus on the goals and not get into the weeds about the implementation and
Yeah.
really, like, are these our values? Do we want this? Is that what we want to work towards? I know we spent a lot of time doing a really deep dive, which can, it's great conversation and it's great discussion, but it eats up a lot of time. And so I don't want to, when we meet again, I just want to make sure we don't get too far in the weeds and we just focus on big picture goals.
And
I'll
you're
say again.
assuming so you can keep us in line with. So, but I agree with you. I think that if we
Yeah.
dive too deep into the weeds, it's not something that we're gonna be doing. We need to be focusing on these goals.
I'll say again, though, the goals affect the recommendation.
Yeah, sure.
And if there's a recommendation that's tied to the goal that you got a problem with, then you can't just say, oh, the goal's great, but the
Well,
recommendation.
and we're gonna talk about the recommendations too, so I think if the goal's fine, but there's something wrong with the recommendation, well, let's get into that recommendation when we get to that step.
I would rather have extra time to get into the weeds of the recommendations rather than these aspirational goals. I think they're pretty clear, you know. I mean, if we only have one more meeting, I mean, if it takes a whole meeting to get through half of the goals, imagine what it will take for us to get through the recommendations. We probably need at least 2 meetings for that, for us to argue that.
Well, I think we just need to be all kind of self-aware, you know, when we're getting into very specifics about studies and land use calculations and things like that. I don't think it's gonna change the goal, fit the recommendation. I think you know, figure out what the goal is, and then let's change the recommendation. You know, let's get the goals right first, 'cause that's important.
But in some cases, if you change the recommendation, you're gonna have to change the goal. Because some of the elements of the goal are in the recommendation.
I think we just need to be careful not to put the cart before the horse.
I can probably meet on the 19th if,
I can
anybody
meet
else.
on the 19th.
Why don't we just take a vote, you don't have to do
I
it.
have a suggestion. That we go over our goals ourselves,
Anybody
let
who's
her know about it,
interested
and
in
talk about
having
the
a meeting on
recommendations at the other
that.
meeting.
And who else can?
Well, I can't be here. I'm interested, but I can't be here.
Well, it seems to be pretty, at least amongst the people that are here.
School board right now.
Yeah, I like that. Would it be possible, since we don't wanna spend so much time on the goals, if the rest of the goals that remain for us to look at, that we haven't seen today, that each of us individually look at that at home, send you what we think about that? We like it or we don't like it, you know, or
So that's what I
whatever.
mentioned earlier, we
Yeah.
we have a form we're using for our internal purposes.
Yeah.
We could share that with you,
Uh-huh.
that just has the goals.
And we could send it to you, and then you could move on to the recommendations, so we don't have to have another whole meeting of just
Or
goals.
we could just say, we're gonna go through all the goals in the first 30 minutes of our next meeting. We want
One would have thought.
Yeah.
And do it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,